بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah ta'ala, in this class, basically in the classes which we're going to start bi'idhnillah, we are not starting this for the first time. It's not the first time. We have other fiqh classes that we've done and we generalized it until we specifically went down to the book of Ashmawiyyah. Like at the moment, I want us to specifically break down Matn Ashmawiyyah for students that want to understand fiqh. And something that each of us need to understand is this. We may study any subject. Maybe it's Arabic, maybe it's tafsir, maybe it's hadith and that. But لا يستغني أحد. No one is exempt from worshipping Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. As long as we said La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, we have to worship Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. You have to know how to pray properly. You have to know how to fast properly. You have to know how to give zakah in the right time, at the right time, and what is the nisab, the threshold that you have to give. And also at the same time, if you want to go to Hajj, you know how you should know the manasik of Hajj, what are the rules of Hajj, what are the wajibat of Hajj, what are the requirements of Hajj, and also at the same time knowing your shahada. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْفِقْهَ يَنْقَسِمُ إِلَى ثَلَاثَةِ أَقْسَامٍ. Fiqh divides to three parts. We have فقه العقيدة. وسماه الإمام أبو حنيفة ماذا؟ الفقه الأكبر. الإمام أبو حنيفة called فقه العقيدة the greatest fiqh. And then we have fiqh al-amal, which is this which we want to study, knowing how to worship Allah with our limbs. It is the fiqh and the understanding of how to worship Allah using our limbs. وهذا عمل اللسان وعمل القلب وعمل الجوارح. Basically using your bodily limbs, using your heart, using your tongue, each one of them. And far and beyond, we have fiqh al-tazkiyah. And what is fiqh al-tazkiyah? Al-adab. You have to understand etiquettes. And طالب العلم لا بد له من أدب. For a student of knowledge, they have to have etiquettes. Without etiquettes, you wouldn't be able to attain knowledge. اعلم هذا. الإمام الشافعي رحمه الله قال ماذا? I studied with Imam Malik for 20 years. And from those 20 years, if anything that I would have left with, it will be his adab rather than what he taught us. وهكذا هكذا تعلم العلماء وهكذا كانوا وهكذا أخذوا هذا العلم وخدموها. This is how they literally worked on it and they served it with adab and etiquettes and morals كذلك. And when it comes to adab, you have to know this. على مراتب. الأدب مع الله تبارك وتعالى، الأدب مع الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم، الأدب مع الصحابة، الأدب مع العلماء، وكذلك الأدب مع الناس والأدب مع نفسك. There's adab in levels. You don't just look at adab in the terms of generalizing it, but there's far and beyond than that. But each one of them are known as fiqh of its own. So fiqh divides to three parts. What we are focusing on is fiqh al-amal, how we act with our limbs to show, to literally present ourselves to Allah correctly. When we do our deeds, we do them correctly. Bear that in mind. And specifically, we're focusing on the book of Abdul Bari al-Ashmawi, rahmatullahi alayhi, nafa'ana Allahu bihi wa bi'ulumihi fi ad-darain. Ameen. What you need to understand as a student of fiqh, mainly, student of fiqh, is this. You're studying fiqh to help the ummah. You're not studying fiqh for yourself alone. You're studying fiqh also to help the ummah, number one. But far and beyond, when you're studying a text in fiqh, there's no text which is neutral, which you would say it does not belong to a madhab. You need to understand that as well. When you study al-Ashmawiyyah, it is under the Maliki madhab. When you study, for example, Zad al-Mustaqni', you're studying the Hanbali madhab. I forgot the lowest of texts. I want to mention to you the small text so that you may understand. If you study Al-Hidayah, if I'm not wrong, it is in the Hanafi madhab. And if you are to study Abu Shuja' مثلا, or Safinatun Najah, you're studying what? You're studying the Shafi'i madhab. So any of these books that you are reading, you notice that they have authority in them. And what's the authority is the madhab. What the modern age has done to us today is that the idea of entitlement has led us to fall into a position where we feel that we are entitled to literally pick and choose what we might decide to make it right. Not what is right, what we decide to determine as right. And then we discredit every single madhab that every alim followed before. Have you asked yourself this? When you read a fiqh book, when you read a hadith book, when you read a tafsir book, sometimes when you even read a book, a text in other ulum, I forgot the name that I wanted to mention. However, you notice that, for example, tafsir ibn Jizay, التسهيل لعلوم التنزيل، هذا صاحب الكتاب المؤلف رحمه الله تعالى ابن جزي الغرناطي، هذا هو كان مالكي المذهب, and it's literally written on the book Maliki al-Maliki. You read another book, you notice that a tafsir written by another alim, Ash-Shafi'i. Then how can we discredit that? So when you're studying a text, don't just look at the text and say, I'm studying fiqh. You have to look at the text and understand, okay, what madhab am I studying at the same time? So what we are going to focus on, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to focus on the Maliki madhab specifically. And I don't want to enter into why the Maliki madhab first and why should we focus on that at the moment. I want us to go into the book itself. For lil'ammi, for the layman, what they need to do first is literally just have a general understanding. That's what you need of fiqh in itself. And then if Allah wills to make you a student of knowledge later on, then هناك مراحل لا بد لطالب العلم أن يمر بها. There are stages and phases that a student of knowledge has to pass through them so that he can become a true student of knowledge, and at the same time then go to the phase of becoming a alim, inshaAllah ta'ala. Al-awwal, who is Abdul Bari al-Ashmawi? Abdul Bari al-Ashmawi, and perhaps we might have mentioned this before, but we want to mention it again. There's little about him. When it comes to biographies of scholars, you notice that there's very little about this alim, which he wrote this book. لكن الله تبارك وتعالى رزقه القبول. Allah provided him and granted him al-qabul, acceptance in his work. And the ulama have done extensive work with his book and on his book. And you notice that we have hawashi. What is a hashiyah? A hashiyah is the explanation of the main text. I want to repeat that again. The hashiyah is the explanation of the main text. That is the most simplest way I can explain that. And what does it do? It literally breaks down word by word so that you can dissect the book and decipher it and understand it in depth. That's the whole purpose. لذلك, you notice that we have several shuruhat when it comes to that. Hashiyatul Safti, you have Hashiyatul Amir, Hashiyatul Adwi, Al-Shabarkhiti. Each one of them, they wrote their own hashiyah when it comes to this text. You notice that Allah shows us it's not about how well known you are, not what we see today, how many followers you have, how famous you might be. When the fans that you have, literally, they cheer for you. It's not about that. It's about the acceptance that Allah literally provides you even after your death. لذلك, you notice many of the ulama that have written successful books, they themselves, they are not known. They're not well known to the masses. But we still enjoy their books and we benefit from their books, subhanAllah. And one of them is this. So his name is Abu al-Abbas, Abdul Bari, Ibn Ahmad, Ibn Abdul Ghani, Ibn Atiq, Ibn al-Shaykh, Sa'id Ibn al-Shaykh, Hassan Abu Naja al-Ashmawi, al-Manufi, al-Azhari, al-Maliki. Now that should be very long. So what you do is, you call him Abu al-Abbas Abdul Bari al-Ashmawi. Simply put, you could call him Abu al-Abbas Abdul Bari al-Ashmawi. Abu al-Abbas Abdul Bari al-Ashmawi. You can know him like that. He is known as min ulama al-qarn al-ashir al-hijri, from among the scholars that appeared in the 10th century according to the lunar calendar, basically from the year 900s onwards from there. And he originally comes from Egypt on top of that. And you notice that a lot of the ulama, they tried to look for his biography, but there's not much that can be provided in regards to that. And they tried their best to look even for the date of his death, and yet they were not successful on finding that as well. But what they've done is that they said, okay, Even if we have little that we know about him, as long as we know where he comes from, he's an authentic alim, and what he's written is authentic at the same time, we should look into the work that he's done and work on it. And they've done as best as they could. And one of the things that they've done, and also I can show you one of the texts simply, is Al-Jawahir al-Zakiyya. Al-Jawahir al-Zakiyya is just the explanation of this text in itself. And this is one of those explanations that we use. And at the moment, I don't want anyone to look into that right now. But what I want to from you is this. What we're going to do in these lessons, we are going to study, and at the same time, when we mention things at the very end of the class, you're going to have questions. And those questions are going to be covering what you have done to test your understanding. Have you understood? Have you at least memorized certain terms so that you may be able to understand and leave with you certain words that you may need every single day? For example, you want to talk about what are the nullifiers of wudu? What leads to nullifying your wudu? What do you call nullification of wudu? You call them nawaqidul wudu, مثلا. You call them what? Nawaqidul wudu. Now, in order for you to be prepared to know them, you need to memorize those words, isn't it? Or maybe you don't know the definition of what is nawaqidul wudu, مثلا. You need to know the definition of it. So you'll be tested at the very end, inshallah, to see if you've understood and you can answer it on your own. Now, does this cater for every single person that literally wants to study? If you want to just generally study fiqh and know what to do, inshallah ta'ala, you can go somewhere around this page. You might see a card appearing, popping over here or over here, inshallah, anywhere, and you can use that for you to just generally learn. Or maybe you can use the link below. You can see the playlist, inshallah ta'ala. Far and beyond, however, if you want to be a student of knowledge and literally start studying fiqh, you can get yourself into the groove of fiqh by memorizing terminologies. And on top of that, even understanding and mastering what you have learnt from the class, inshallah ta'ala. One of the things that you should memorize is the asma of the ulama, the asma of the scholars that literally you are studying from. So let's say, for example, from this book, you're studying from Al-Allama Abu Al-Abbas Abdul Bari Al-Ashmawi, Al-Rifa'i, Al-Manufi, alaysa kadhalik. Now, I might know all of that, but I don't want from you to know all of those. I just want you to know at least Abu Al-Abbas Abdul Bari Al-Ashmawi. Simply put, 3 names. Khalas, intaha. Hakada. Once you know that, inshallah ta'ala, as we said, we don't even know the date of his death. That is quite vague to the ulama. They don't really have a clear-cut date on that, so they let go of that. But what they did is they did a fine job in trying to work on the text and what he has left behind as a turath, inshaAllah ta'ala. So what does he say as he begins in his text? قال الشيخ الإمام العالم العلامة عبد الباري العشماوي الرفاعي رحمه الله تعالى. The Shaykh himself, Al-Imam. Now look at the adab of the ulama. Now when he wrote this, did he write it himself? For example, these words, Al-Imam, the leader, Al-Alimu, the scholar, Al-Allama, the grand scholar, Abdul Bari, Al-Ashmawi, Al-Rifa'i, rahimahullah ta'ala. Did he write all of these words? No. He's not the one that wrote this. Because one of the etiquettes of the ulama is that always when they address themselves as themselves, they would never address themselves as a alim or a sheikh or an imam, because they always look at themselves as they don't deserve. I'lam hada. When a person is seeking knowledge, they end up falling into these 3 levels. Level number 1 is the level when they attain little knowledge and they feel they know everything. That's how they feel, and they become a little bit arrogant and sometimes even ignorant, and yet they don't want to be told anything and they start imposing upon others. That's what they do. But then when they pass that level and then they come to another level, which is level 2, they feel like they know too much, but at the same time there's a lot that they don't know. That's what they feel. But then at this stage, they in some sense they might feel different from others. They feel like they know more than others, but yet they still understand that they don't know, because there's a lot that they haven't covered, a lot of ground of knowledge which they haven't been able to do what? To put together. Like in stage number 3 is the highest of all, is that they've reached to the qimmah, to the pinnacle of knowledge, but whenever they look at themselves, they feel they know nothing. And when they look at themselves and look at the other, they feel like others are better than themselves. That's how they are. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those. Because in these days that we live in at the moment, pretty scary times, that everyone, not only do they feel entitled, but they feel that they are better than the other. And that's how we're being nurtured, and that's how we are growing. And even when you look at cartoons that children are watching, anime and animations and that, they teach children exactly how to become arrogant and feel like they are them and they are better than others. How does Islam teach us that? It doesn't teach us that. أليس كذلك? لذلك when the ulama, you notice that they write these titles, they don't write these titles themselves. In fact, it's the students that write this for them to show their position. That's what they do. للتبجيل والتعظيم والشرف هكذا إن شاء الله تعالى. So what does he say? He says that سألني بعض الأصدقاء أن أعمل مقدمة في الفقه على مذهب الإمام مالك بن أنس رضي الله عنه فأجبته إلى ذلك راجيا للثواب. الشيخ هذا رحمة الله عليه نفعنا الله به وبعلومه في الدارين. What does he say? سألني بعض الأصدقاء. Some of my friends, they asked me أن أعمل مقدمة, that I work on an introductory text, basically, not the entire madhab, just an introductory text, في الفقه, in the subject of fiqh, على مذهب الإمام مالك, in the madhab of الإمام مالك ibn Anas رضي الله عنه, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him. And I responded back to him in the hopes of attaining thawab. This tells us something. He did not write this book for the purpose of just writing haphazardly. No, he wrote this book because his peers and scholars, which might be even beyond him, what did they do? They asked from him something which will benefit the ummah, and he did this so that he may attain thawab from Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. That's why he did this work. And the ulama teach us that there are shurut of kitabah. You have to follow the conditions of writing. You don't just write. And one of the conditions you write is when there is a need and you have been asked several times to cover that gap, for you to write on that, and maybe there is inadequate text or maybe works that have been done in a certain area of a certain field, then you fill in that gap when it is deemed necessary. Not when it's just necessary, when it's deemed necessary to be done. That's when you write. Nowadays, everyone writes anything and everything that you might find out there, published every time. Whether it's authentic, not authentic, whether it makes sense, it doesn't make sense, it's all written. People are publishing left, right and center. لكن العلماء لم يكونوا هكذا وهكذا العلماء إلى اليوم. The scholars, they do not just write. They write that which they feel is necessary for the ummah to attain. And when they see that there's a gap or something is missing or knowledge is scattered everywhere among the shurut, if you have that a certain subject is scattered everywhere. Let's say for example, وإن كان الإمام الشافعي رحمه الله تعالى أول من وضع علم أصول الفقه, the first that who put together علم أصول الفقه, not that أصول الفقه, the principles of fiqh did not exist, they did exist. لكن في أيدي العلماء, in the hands of the scholars, like Imam Malik ibn Anas, Imam Abu Hanifa, they had all their principles. Even he himself, Imam Shafi'i, they had their principles. But then because they were scattered everywhere, he said that it's work that needs to be done, and he put it together for the scholars, for the ummah, so that they can learn. Imagine that. He did it when it did not exist. So we don't just write. So one of the things that you learn from this is that you don't just write, but you write when it's needed, inshaAllah ta'ala. So we're going to get into the book immediately, and I don't want to delve into so many masail which are unrelated to the book itself. I want us to just start deciphering what the text gives us and what the alim provides us, inshaAllah ta'ala. قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى باب نواقض الوضوء باب نواقض الوضوء. Now when you read the text, you notice that they say that there's a mubtada' mahdhuf. Now, for the students of knowledge that are studying Arabic, and if you are looking forward to study Arabic as well with us, inshallah ta'ala, we have started the Arabic classes, which are free for you. If you look into the description below as well, you find the playlist that has started. You can go through that, and we're focusing on trying to help students of knowledge so that they can attain mainly the ability to read a text such as this. That's why you will see it on the screen popping up at the moment. Whenever we read, you will see it followed up with a line so that you may follow along. Even if it had diacritics at the moment, you notice that هذا المتن للمبتدئين. This matn is for the beginners. Even if you don't understand Arabic, as long as you can read along, inshallah ta'ala. Read along with me. That's why I said specifically, we are tailoring this for the students, those who want to become students of fiqh, students of knowledge. We have done already classes in fiqh before, and there is a playlist, as you know. Like, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to specifically tailor for the students that want to learn, inshallah ta'ala. So they say that there is a mubtada' mahdhuf. Mubtada' mahdhuf known as هذا باب نواقض الوضوء. So originally is not باب نواقض الوضوء, it's هذا باب نواقض الوضوء. وأنا أتذكر في أول الدرس في الدرس الأول عندما كنت مع الشيخ وأتعلم معه حفظه الله تعالى, he asked me, where is the mubtada'? I thought the mubtada' was bab, like that. لكن قال لي لا, هذا ليس بالمبتدأ. This is not the mubtada'. The mubtada' is hidden, is removed in this case. So you say the ulama, they literally said هذا, this is the chapter. Now the word bab, it means the door, isn't it? Now the reason why they use bab over here is for opening a new chapter. You use a door as a barrier and towards another, as a barrier from what? From entering somewhere. The moment you open the door, now you have access to what? To that which is beyond the door, behind the walls that you are passing by. So yeah, they use the word bab to show you that now you have the right to enter into the chapter itself. Before that, you are not able to do so. So you cannot skip a chapter until you do what? You finish off a chapter first. Lacking something to mention to you, what you see here is literally against the norms of how books of fiqh start. The books of fiqh, when they start, besides them starting with the qawa'id of fiqh, or maybe some of the usul of fiqh, or maybe starting with aqidah and that, you notice that they start with at-tahara. And when they start with taharatul miyah, maybe they start with water first. لذلك, if you read, for example, from Ashalul Masalik, the moment they finish talking about aqidah, the first thing they say is what? وَكُلُّ مَاءٍ نَازِلٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ أَوْ نَابِعٍ مِّنْ أَرْضٍ أَوْ جَارٍ نَمَا بَاقٍ عَلَى أَوْصَافِهِ أَوْ غُيِّرَ مِنْ أَرْضِهِ أَوْ مَا عَلَيْهِ قَدْ جَرَى أَوْ مُكْثِهِ فَمُطْلَقٌ طَهُورٌ. And then they carry on like that. Or if you read from Ibn Ashir, you notice that they say what? They start with فَصْلٌ وَتَحْصُلُ الطَّهَارَةُ بِمَا. That's how they start. They start with the tahara, purification of water. Like in what the author over here, the musannif, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-imam al-Abdul Bari al-Ashmawiyyah, rahimahullah, he doesn't start like that. What he started with the nullifiers of wudu. What do we call the nullifiers of wudu in Arabic? We call them as nawaqidul wudu. Bear that in mind. The nullifiers of wudu, they are known as nawaqidul wudu, inshaAllah ta'ala. Is that a problem? No, it's not. It's not a problem at all. So it's okay to start like this. I don't want to get into the logic behind it and the differences of the ulama, what they say. Why did he start with this? Why didn't he start like that? What was the reason behind it? Was there a specific purpose for that? What logically, according to the mind, how it works, why he should have started with wudu before he talks about that which breaks the wudu? I don't want to get into that discussion. But just know, as he started with this, he decided to start with this rather than following the norm, which is okay, but it would have been better if he started with what you used to do wudu, how do you do wudu, and then after that, what nullifies your wudu. Because you already understand how do you do wudu, what's the process of wudu, and how do you attain wudu before you even understand what breaks your wudu. Because, for example, a new Muslim embraces Islam, isn't it? And then they don't even know what wudu means. And you tell them that these are the nullifiers of wudu before they even know how to do wudu. How do you reconcile with that? Imagine that. So that's one argument, but there's literally a list of arguments, and I don't want to mention that. So that's one argument which you can see why the ulama, they had some form of a discussion in regards to this, inshallah. So let's carry on. He says, Babu nawaqidil wudu, the chapter of the nullifiers of wudu. Single form of nullifier, you call it as naqid. Naqid. Now this is just a fa'idah lughawiyah. Naqid. That which does what? Nullifies the wudu. But in this case, we're going to say what? Nawaqidul wudu, because there are several nullifiers of wudu. He says, i'lam وفقك الله تعالى. اعلم وفقك الله تعالى. Acknowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you tawfiq. أن نواقض الوضوء, that surely the nullifiers of wudu. Now notice the word is repeating itself. على قسمين. They are of two types. أحداث وأسباب أحداث. Now other terminologies. أحداث, they are impurities. In simple words, أحداث is jam'u hadath, the plural of hadath, known as impurities. And then they are asbabu ahdath. Category number 2, asbabu ahdath, reasons which lead to impurity. Are they impure by themselves? That's the question now you should ask yourself. If they are reasons which lead to impurity, should we call them impure? The answer is no. They are not impure by themselves, but they lead a person to fall into a state of hadath. Into a state of hadath. A hadath also in Arabic is known as something which is new, something that is tari and jadid, something that had just occurred. So when this happens, literally, it's against the norms of what mankind is used to, or what a person is used to. So you notice that when a person falls into a state of hadath, one of the meanings of hadath is falling into impurity or falling into something which is against what a person is required to be in that state. So, mathalan, for example, if you are supposed to be in a state of being awake, or maybe in a state of, let's say a state of being in Islam, if you are required to be in that state, then all of a sudden Allah forbid, wal-iyadhu billah, someone leaves the fold of Islam, or a person literally, for this one, not wal-iyadhu billah, by the way, you fall asleep, mathalan, like that. You're not supposed to fall asleep, like very deep asleep, basically deep asleep, and then you say you still have wudu. That becomes a little bit problematic. Bear that in mind. So you notice we have two types of nullifiers of wudu. So you understand this. There are ahdath, which is jam'u hadath, and then there are asbabu ahdath. Ahdath, which are impurities by themselves, and then you have asbabu ahdath, those which lead to impurity. Now in this lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we're just going to focus on what? The ahdath themselves. However, what I want to bring to your attention is this. Don't look at this lesson and say, or maybe this text that we are covering, and say, Alhamdulillah, I've studied fiqh, that's enough. The reason why this is known as muqaddimah, not even a text in fiqh, like basically an actual text that you can say at least you've done something. Like for example, you study Ibn Ashir. Ibn Ashir is a bit bigger than this. Not even a bit, it's actually big. Because there's Babul Zakah, which this book does not contain. There's Babul Hajj, Al-Umrah, this book does not contain that. Bear that in mind. And on top of that, there are a lot of chapters which relate to Salah themselves, which are not provided. And one example that I like to give a lot is, let's say, Mas'alatul Ru'af. Okay, Babu Mas'alatul Ru'af. What is Ru'af? Nose bleeding. It's not provided over here. Another one which is the most simplest of all, Al-Hayd. But مسألة الحيض والنفاس. For example, like Babul Hayd wal Nifas, when it comes to the chapter of Hayd and Nifas, women's cycle and monthly cycles, and also after giving birth, postnatal cycles that they go through, all of those, you notice that it's not provided over here. There are other chapters as well that are not provided in here. So you cannot say and claim that I've studied fiqh, but what you can claim is that at least I've removed from myself some ignorance of fiqh, that I at least know I can protect my salah, at the very least. You can say you can protect your salah, inshallah ta'ala. What am I trying to discourage you? No, I'm not discouraging you. In fact, I am encouraging you to understand that our deen, its knowledge is vast. No matter what the world provides us today of universities, whether it's any type of level of learning that you've had, but you got to understand this. Our religion is vast and magnificent when it comes to knowledge. That's why you notice the ulama have done magnificent work, great work. They have done work tirelessly, and they said themselves, like Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he worked so hard until his son literally asks him, my father, don't you rest? Don't you have a day of resting? Then his father says, I am preparing for the rest to come. What is the rest that he's looking forward to? The rest in Jannah. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh says the same thing. He's preparing for his rest in Jannah, retirement in Jannah. Allahu Akbar. He's tirelessly working for the ummah. And you notice the ulama, they've done this as well. لذلك الإمام Malik ibn Anas radiallahu anhu, what does he say? He says that a student of knowledge, a true student of knowledge, what they are going through is a form of striving. It's a form of striving. Is that they have fallen into a form of working hard as if they've gone into a battlefield. Because what they are doing, they're dedicating their lives. It's through thick and thin, difficulty and ease, hardship, or maybe times of goodness and times that they're enjoying. Through all of those, it doesn't matter the weather, it doesn't matter the position they're in, they're still seeking knowledge. And that's a true student of knowledge. And Allah tests a student of knowledge to see, would they wither away and escape, or would they still continue firmly on the path? Bear that in mind. So the ahdath he mentions over here are 5. And I will leave you with this without even giving you questions, inshallah ta'ala. What does he say? فَأَمَّا الْأَحْدَاثُ فَخَمْسَةٌ فَأَمَّا الْأَحْدَاثُ فَخَمْسَةٌ. And when it comes to ahdath, they are 5. ثَلَاثَةٌ مِّنَ الْقُبُلِ. 3 which come from the front passage. وَهِيَ, and they are الْمَذِيُّ وَالْوَدِيُّ وَالْبَوْلُ. I just want you to listen to those terms. Understood? وَاثْنَانِ مِنَ الدُّبُرِ وَهُمَا. And 2, they come from the back passage. And they are الْغَائِطُ وَالرِّيحُ. And they are known as excrement and also stool and rih, passing wind. Those 2, passing wind and excrement. So 3 come from the front passage and 3 come from the back passage. But this leaves us with questions and far and beyond. And there are some other things which we need to clarify over here. And what do we call, maybe in this case, a hadith? How could we define it in jurisprudentially? And at the same time, how could we define these ahdath that we have mentioned as well? Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to look into them in our next lesson. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.